Every group ride has that one moment. Someone new shows up on flat pedals with sneakers, and somebody else, clipped in, laughs and says, "You'll go faster once you get real pedals." It's said so often in cycling that almost nobody questions it anymore. But when you actually pull apart the physics, the sports science, and what professional testing has shown, the answer isn't nearly as settled as the group ride consensus makes it sound. The theory behind clipless pedals is simple and, on paper, compelling. When your foot is mechanically locked to the pedal, you're not just pushing down on the downstroke, you're supposedly also pulling up on the backstroke, effectively applying force through more of the pedal circle instead of just the bottom half. If that were fully true, clipless pedals would represent a meaningful power advantage, and the case would be closed. The problem is that decades of pedaling force studies, including work published in the Journal of Applied Biomechanics and repeated by exercise physiology labs testing both trained cyclists and untrained riders, keep finding the same thing. Almost nobody actually pulls up effectively during the upstroke, clipped in or not. The muscles involved in pulling a pedal up, mainly the hip flexors, are simply much weaker and less efficient at that motion than the quads and glutes are at pushing down. Even elite track sprinters, tested on force pedals that measure output through the entire 360-degree rotation, show only a small upward force contribution, and it's often close to zero net positive work once you account for the energy cost of engaging those muscles. In other words, the "you can pull up as well as push down" advantage that clipless pedals are supposed to unlock turns out to be mostly theoretical. Most of your propulsive force, clipped in or on flats, comes from the downstroke. This single finding undercuts the most common argument for why clipless pedals should make you faster, and it's the reason a lot of coaches have quietly stopped repeating it as gospel. So where do clipless pedals actually help? The honest answer is efficiency and consistency of foot position rather than raw power. When your foot is locked into the same spot on the pedal every single stroke, your pedaling technique becomes more repeatable, which matters over a long ride when fatigue starts to change your form. On flats, your foot can shift slightly with every pedal stroke, and under fatigue, that drift tends to move your foot toward the toe, which reduces power transfer and can strain the ankle and Achilles over a long ride. Clipless systems remove that variable entirely, which is a real benefit for long-distance riding and racing, even if it's not the same thing as the mythical pulling up power boost. Sprinting is the other place where clipless genuinely matters, and this one isn't disputed. In a hard, out-of-the-saddle sprint, the forces on the pedal are high enough and the pedaling motion violent enough that a flat pedal setup risks your foot slipping off entirely, especially if the pedal or shoe surface is at all wet or muddy. Track sprinters and road racers finishing a bunch sprint are clipped in for exactly this reason. It isn't that the mechanical connection makes the sprint more powerful, it's that it makes the power you're already generating safe to deliver without your foot skating off the platform mid-effort. Climbing out of the saddle is a related case worth separating out, because it gets lumped in with sprinting even though the demands are slightly different. On a long, steep climb out of the saddle, the rider is rocking the bike side to side under each pedal stroke, and a secure connection to the pedal helps keep that rocking motion efficient rather than sloppy. It's a smaller effect than the sprint safety argument, but it's part of why climbers, even ones who otherwise wouldn't care about the upstroke myth, still overwhelmingly choose clipless for long mountain stages. The margin here is real but modest, and it's easy to overstate if you're not accounting for how much of it comes down to rider habit and confidence rather than a hard physical advantage. Now flip to the flat pedal side of the argument, and the case is less about raw output and more about technique and versatility. Mountain biking, particularly technical descending and enduro riding, has seen a real resurgence in flat pedal use among professional riders over the last decade. And it isn't because those riders don't know about clipless systems. Aggressive flat pedal designs from companies like Crank Brothers, with the Stamp line, and One-Up components, use large platforms and long pins that grip a stiff-soled shoe aggressively without locking the foot in place. That freedom lets a rider make split-second adjustments to foot position on rough technical terrain, or bail out instantly if a technical section goes wrong. In mountain biking specifically, several Enduro World Cup competitors have said publicly that they feel more confident and, in some cases, ride certain technical features faster on flats because the instant disengagement removes hesitation before a risky move. That confidence factor is worth dwelling on because it's the part of this debate that's hardest to put a number on, but arguably matters most in the real world. A rider who is even slightly worried about being able to unclip in time before a technical feature will unconsciously brake earlier, carry less speed into a corner, and hesitate before committing to a line. None of that shows up in a lab test measuring watts at the crank, but all of it shows up in a stopwatch on an actual trail. This is exactly why flat pedals have found such a strong foothold in disciplines where split-second decisions and bailing out safely matter more than sustained power output over a long, steady effort. That's a genuinely different kind of faster than what a road cyclist means by the word. On smooth pavement, at a steady effort, over a long distance, the fixed foot position and aerodynamic consistency of clipless pedals edges out flats in essentially every controlled comparison, mostly because of pedaling consistency rather than a mechanical power advantage. On technical single track, where a rider's confidence and ability to bail out or adjust foot position mid-obstacle actually determines how fast they can safely carry speed through a section, flat pedals can be the faster choice for certain riders in certain terrain, because hesitation costs more time than a marginal pedaling efficiency gain ever could. If you're trying to decide which setup actually fits how you ride, the terrain matters more than the internet consensus does. Tell us in the comments whether you're riding road, gravel, or technical trail, and we'll help you figure out whether switching is actually going to move the needle for you, or just change how your feet feel at the end of a ride. Shoe stiffness plays a bigger role in this debate than most riders give it credit for, and it's a factor that gets lost whenever the conversation turns into clipless versus flats, as if the pedal alone decides the outcome. A stiff, carbon-soled shoe, whether it's clipped into a pedal or resting on a grippy flat platform, transfers power more efficiently than a soft-soled sneaker, regardless of what's happening at the cleat. Riders who switch from a soft street shoe on flat pedals to a stiff, flat pedal-specific shoe, like 510's Freerider Pro, often notice a meaningful improvement in power transfer. And that improvement has nothing to do with being clipped in. A lot of the real-world clipless felt so much faster, experienced riders report, is actually the shoe stiffness upgrade that tends to come bundled with switching systems, not the mechanical connection itself. This gets misattributed constantly, because most riders who switch to clipless are, at the same time, switching from a casual sneaker to a dedicated cycling shoe. They feel an improvement and credit the pedal system, when a controlled comparison would show the stiff sole is doing most of the work. If you want to isolate the actual variable, the fair test is a stiff-soled flat pedal shoe against a stiff-soled clipless shoe, not a soft sneaker against a race-ready clipless setup, because that second comparison was never really about the pedal in the first place. Weight is a smaller factor but worth mentioning, since it comes up constantly in comment sections. High-end clipless pedals like Shimano's Dura Ace line or Look's Keo Blade Carbon are genuinely lighter than most flat pedals, simply because there's less platform material to build. But the weight difference between a good pair of clipless pedals and a good pair of flat pedals is measured in grams, not anything that will show up in a finish line photo. Anyone citing pedal weight as a deciding factor in speed is reaching for a number that sounds precise, but doesn't actually move the needle at the power outputs and distances most riders are dealing with. Cornering is one more place the two systems genuinely diverge, and it cuts in flat pedals' favor for a specific reason. Being clipped in gives you a fixed connection to the bike through the pedal, which some riders find helps with precise planned cornering lines on smooth pavement, especially at speed in a pace line or criterium. But on loose or unpredictable surfaces, that same fixed connection becomes a liability if the bike steps out from under you, because your feet can't instinctively find the ground the way they can on flats. Gravel and mountain bike riders navigating loose corners often value being able to dab a foot instantly far more than they value the marginal aerodynamic or pedaling consistency benefit of staying clipped in. Learning curve is the practical factor that rarely gets mentioned in these debates, but absolutely affects a rider's actual real-world speed in the first few months on a new system. Clipless pedals require practicing the clip-in and clip-out motion until it becomes automatic, and nearly every experienced cyclist has a story about tipping over at a stoplight during that learning period because they forgot to unclip in time. That awkward transition period doesn't make anyone faster, it just makes them nervous and hesitant until the motion becomes second nature, usually after a few weeks of regular riding. Flat pedals skip that learning curve entirely, which is part of why they remain the default recommendation for brand new riders and kids just getting into the sport. Maintenance and cost also factor into the real-world decision, even though they rarely get mentioned in the which one is faster framing. Clipless systems require cleats that wear down and need periodic replacement, plus shoes that are generally more expensive than a stiff-soled flat pedal shoe. Flat pedal pins also wear and occasionally need replacing after a rock strike or a hard crash, but the overall system tends to be cheaper to maintain over the life of the bike. None of this changes which system is faster in a vacuum, but it does affect which system a rider actually keeps using consistently. And consistency in training and riding volume matters more for long-term speed gains than any marginal advantage either pedal system offers on a single ride. Weather is another practical variable worth factoring in, since a lot of the online debate happens as though every ride takes place on a dry, sunny day. Wet or muddy conditions make flat pedals noticeably less secure, since the connection relies entirely on friction between shoe and pin rather than a mechanical lock. Clipless systems hold their connection regardless of surface moisture, which is part of why cyclocross racers who spend entire races riding through mud almost universally choose clipless, despite the sport's off-road technical nature. That single detail undercuts the simple "off-road always means flats" assumption plenty of riders make by default. Put it all together, and the honest conclusion isn't the one that gets repeated on group rides. Clipless pedals don't make you faster because of some mythical pulling up power boost. That effect is mostly a myth that force pedal testing has repeatedly debunked. What clipless pedals actually offer is consistency, security in hard efforts like sprints and climbs, and a stable platform for long, steady-state riding, which does translate into real speed over a long road ride or race. Flat pedals, especially paired with a stiff, grippy shoe, offer nearly identical pedaling efficiency for most riders in most situations, while adding the ability to bail out instantly, adjust foot position on the fly, and ride technical terrain with more confidence. Neither system is objectively faster in every context. The rider who picks the system that matches their terrain and riding style is the one who ends up faster, not the rider who picked whichever system won the argument in the comments section. It's also worth acknowledging that a lot of riders make this decision based on what their friends or club ride on, rather than what actually suits their own riding. There's nothing wrong with following the group's default, especially if you're new and just want one less thing to think about. But it's worth knowing that the choice isn't as objectively settled as group ride folklore makes it sound. A recreational rider doing steady weekend miles on pavement will likely feel most comfortable clipped in once the learning curve passes. A rider spending most of their time on technical single track, or a brand new cyclist still building confidence, may genuinely ride faster and more relaxed on a good set of flat pedals with a stiff shoe. Both answers can be true at the same time, for different riders on different terrain, which is exactly why this debate never actually resolves itself in a comment section. Whichever setup you're running right now, the biggest speed gain most riders are leaving on the table has nothing to do with pedals at all, and everything to do with fit and shoe stiffness. If you want us to break down whether your current shoe and cleat setup is actually holding you back, drop your current pedal system and riding style in the comments, and we'll walk through it.